stripper. Stripper. I didn't call you a whore.
I'm a dancer.
Welcome to Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall, and you can follow me on Twitter at Braden Gall.
Mine's Erin Dugan. You can follow me on Twitter at the Erin Dugan or Instagram, Erin_Dugan.
Anything going on in the SEC these days, Erin?
Couple things.
Two, three things.
I wore my like flirting with houndstooth jacket because I know it's Alabama's struggling, and you know what? You guys don't really need a pick me up. I'm a Vandy fan, so you know it's not that bad. But I just wanted to support you guys because it's all relative.
No, you guys are worthy of pick me up. Alabama, my bleeding heart does not go out to Alabama fans who have been eliminated for largely. I hope, we all hope, one can hope, the world can hope and dream from the playoff. We will discuss what I told you was going to happen last week on the show when I said LSU outright at home in Baton Rouge against Alabama. I tried to tell y'all last week.
You did say that.
And it happened. It happened in insanely dramatic fashion. Georgia dominated Tennessee. We'll get to that. We've got all kinds of coaching stuff to deal with Auburn. Neal McCready going to join us from Rebel Grove, covering all things Ole Mississippi. Is Lane Kiffin interested in the Auburn job? They will host Alabama this week. And again, Ole Miss still has a chance to sneak its way into Atlanta, so they're still a huge factor. That's, again, according to the playoff rankings, that'll be number 9 versus number 11 this week, so that's going to be a really great game. So a whole lot of stuff to get to. We got Texas A&M drama. We got Florida, South Carolina, like so much stuff going on. And I will say, Erin, I know this is an SEC show. We talk to SEC fans, but there's not many, what are the reasons the SEC is the greatest? Well, it just means more. They win all the championships. They produce more NFL players. The attendance records every single year. They win, the attendance battle every single year, whatever that counts. They make as much money as the Big Ten and are as wealthy as anybody, if not the most wealthiest conference in college football.
But I think the most wealthy conference.
I think what makes it special, though, is regular season Saturdays like that one, where the entire country has to watch and wants to tune in to what your product is offering, not once, but 2 different games. And that doesn't happen more than once or twice a year in other conferences. What makes the SEC special is its ability to dominate a regular season Saturday. And that's what we had on Saturday. So
yeah, that's a very astute way to put it. And it's true. And and environmentally, I mean, this plays into it. It's not only the matchup, it's what everything that happens around that matchup and the passion. And then all you have to do is be I guess I wish I was in Athens on Saturday. No offense to my friend's wedding. It was great. But when you see that on TV, it hits different.
Yep, no question. And we'll get to playoff rankings, of course. If you're on the YouTube page, by the way, turn on the notifications. Please watch the show. We do appreciate it. Again, Neal McCready coming up later on. We've got everything to discuss today. Huge show. Just like we had kind of a mega cast last week, we'll have another big one this week. But if you're watching, Erin Dugan, we need a name for the room that you are in. I'm going to call it the Mike Price Players Lounge, because there's some, if you're not watching, it does look a little bit like a backstage showgirls room, maybe one that Mike Price might have been fired from down in Floribama. I don't know. What do you think? Can you come up with a name? We're
literally 3 minutes into this episode, and Braden already called me a whore, so you can clip that out for socials.
No, stripper. I didn't call you a whore.
I'm a dancer, which I am. Which I am, so it's partially true.
You are a dancer. It's so funny you say that. I would my daughters are in dance.
That I'm a stripper?
No.
What part's funny?
No, that you're a dancer. Because I actually thought about this over the weekend, because my 6 and 4-year-old girls are my 6-year-old in particular loves dance class. She goes to dance class, and I'm like, dude, I need to talk to Dugan to teach me 2 or 3 basic steps so that I can just teach my 6-year-old that don't involve Mike Price or the room you're currently sitting in, which definitely looks like a backstage showgirls room.
You need a little tombe pas de bourrée action. I'll teach it to you. Don't know what that means. You
nope. No idea what that means.
Exotic dancers also speak French. Most people don't know that.
And quantum physics.
And that also. Well, so since we're on the topic, to motivate people to watch the YouTubes, not only because Braden
Erin will strip.
This took a turn.
We're going to get a lot of subs.
Honestly, I'm not totally above it. I told you there's a fake OnlyFans account. It's just lean into it. Can't beat them, join them. No, I should start. You know what I should do? We should run a promo where we give out a prize to the very first person that can tweet. I should start flicking you off once an episode in silence, and you can't acknowledge it. And I'm not going to either, not verbally.
So neither one of us are allowed to acknowledge that you are telling me to F off, like with a hand gesture.
Flip the bird, yep.
Okay.
And the very first person to tweet at us the exact time code from YouTube wins a prize.
How about the screen grab?
The what?
The screen grab. Just take a screen grab.
Oh, yeah, screen grab. Yeah, that's perfect. That's even better.
Take a screen grab, and the internet will just be filled with Erin Dugan flipping me the bird every week.
No one will be surprised.
Not a bad. No, yeah, it tracks.
We're gonna do that. Okay, I'll figure out what the prize is, and I'll get back to y'all.
Okay.
It starts this week.
One article of clothing every week. No, just
that I'm wearing. Okay, we got to go. We got
getting really creepy real fast.
Yep, it is. We need to
stop. By the way,
Lord help us.
All of this wonderful content you're listening to, this high level, highbrow.
Oh no, don't do this now.
Content
don't.
Is brought to you by
J.E. Dunn, the saddest sponsor in the world as of now. No, just kidding. The best place to work. Much better than the Hustler Hollywood.
Which has free parking, but not really. Not really.
Please help me.
jedunn.com is the website.
Yep.
This is not a complicated pitch from us. I don't think we need to oversell this at all.
It's a good job, and they want to hire. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. They are looking to hire really good people for really good jobs. It's not all that complicated. They pay very well. They take care of their people. $5 billion in annual revenue, so they're not going anywhere. They're not downsizing. They're not going to sell their company to some tech guru in California and then have him fire everybody. That ain't going to happen at J.E. Dunn. They're going to take care of you because they care about their employees and their careers as much as you do. So go check them out. jedunn.com is the website. Peruse the different offerings they've got. There's not like you don't have to be like an engineer. You can have any background at all. You could be in HR. You could be in communications. You could have a marketing background. You can do anything as long as you want to work hard and be a part of a team. And that's it. And they're going to take care of you. They're going to take care of you if you do that. So jedunn.com, top 100 healthiest place to work in the United States, offices all across the Southeast. And I know a lot of us out there in the world are looking for more inspiration in our careers. So check out jedunn.com.
Yes.
What's Mike Price doing these days, by the way? I don't even know.
I don't know.
All right, the playoff rankings came out. Georgia Bulldogs, obviously, number 1 with the bullet. They have dominating wins over number 5 Tennessee and number 6 Oregon. Doesn't get much better than that. Tennessee versus TCU. I think I don't know. Like if TCU's resume last week was worse than Alabama's last week, I don't know how it could be better than Tennessee's this week. So again, don't get too worked up about it because it's all going to change. But I thought TCU being ahead of Tennessee is pretty laughable. There's nothing about TCU's team resume, wins, strength of schedule that is better than Tennessee's. They didn't get dominated by Georgia, but TCU hasn't played at number 1 Georgia, at number 7 LSU, and Alabama at number 9 at home. Tennessee's played all those teams.
Yeah, Tennessee's the only one that has three wins over teams in the rankings at all.
Yeah, and crushed Kentucky, which is also ranked at number 24. Ole Miss at number 11. That's a little high for me, but we'll learn. We'll find out. Neal McCready going to join us later on. Alabama at number 9. LSU at number 7. Interesting to note, I thought, that Florida State being ranked at 23 is a good sign for LSU because it means the committee values that loss, which, again, if you go back and think about it, was a blocked extra point. At the end of the game. Like, that was a pretty damn basically even game.
Yep.
In Brian Kelly's first game and in Jaden Daniels' first game. Let me ask you a question about if you're on the committee.
Okay.
And I haven't heard this conversation. I don't know how I feel about it, so I want to see what you say.
Okay.
Should the committee? So Oregon is in game number 1. Oregon is number 6, right behind Tennessee, right ahead of LSU, and is going to be a major factor in whether or not a second SEC team gets in. So Dan Lanning, first-year head coach, at a program in his first game with a quarterback who's transferred in his first game across the country at a neutral-ish field, but really it's a road game for Oregon. They get destroyed by Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
LSU, Brian Kelly, first game as the coach at LSU. Jaden Daniels, transfer quarterback, first game, neutral field, far more, LSU-ish crowd there, obviously.
Yeah.
They lose in a very, very, very close game. how much should the newness of week 1 be something with the coaches and the quarterbacks and all those things? Like, should that be a part of the committee's consideration? Is that a part of what makes a team better than another team or not? Or is it just how a team has evolved throughout the season and you just are who you are? Does that question make sense?
It does to me. Yeah. There is something to be said for peaking at the right time. I mean, overall record does matter, but just there are a lot of intangibles factored in when they're putting these teams in order, and hitting your stride at the right time, not having injuries close to the end of the season or major ones, that all matters. To me, what you're asking, or the answer to your question in my mind, is I feel like it should be able to help, but I don't know how much it should hurt.
I don't think it should hurt. Well,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's what it is. It's trying to add context to a loss. And if let's say Tennessee, let's replace Oregon or LSU with Tennessee and say year number 2, Josh Heupel, year number 2, Hendon Hooker, they play Pittsburgh hypothetically in a neutral field and they lose that game in the first week of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that less, understandable? Like, isn't that more of a knock on the team because the coach is there in his second season and the quarterback's been around? And like, maybe that's not something the committee should consider. But I do believe that, like, in my head, for some reason, I sort of say, all right, first game of a new coaching staff, being at a program, like, is there a little bit of wiggle room that you may give? Like, again, in this case, LSU and Oregon have very similar situations. And so, and again, if Tennessee fans want to get into the playoff, they should not be worried about, I don't think they should be worried about TCU. I think everyone in the country should be worried about a one-loss Pac-12 champion. I think one-loss Pac-12 champion is going to take a spot.
Yeah.
And the committee said the committee said Oregon and Tennessee's losses to Georgia are viewed very similarly. Mm-hmm. I would lean Tennessee's being slightly better, but we're going to get to that.
I mean, we're going to get to that. Wasn't it 2 touchdowns versus like?
Yeah, but they were both. The committee said they're both blowouts. They don't view them all that differently. And we'll get to Georgia, Tennessee in just a second. But
what was the final of Georgia, Oregon?
49-3.
Okay, but those are different.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that because the committee said they were not competitive football games. Neither one of them were competitive football games. And I would agree with that. I would then rank Tennessee's loss as being slightly better than Oregon. Like, again, they were more competitive. It was a closer score. It's on a true road field. Well,
that's what makes the college football playoff rankings and just the whole process different than just these algorithms or these computers that spit out these particular, numbers based on all of these stats, is that there are a lot of intangibles that they factor in, and there is a human part of it that's supposed to be helpful and not hurtful, in theory. So, with what you're saying about, adding context to a loss, that's absolutely right. So if you're taking into account all these other intangibles, and it's not just cranking a number through a system, I think you absolutely have to factor in everything about that particular loss. And to me, I'll wait, but I don't think Tennessee's loss is nearly as bad.
Yeah, and we can get into that. Okay. I don't think TCU at 4 has a case. Their best. The only opponent they have played that is ranked currently is Kansas State, and Kansas State was on its 3rd string quarterback in the second half of that game, and they were trailing by 18 points in the second quarter. They had to fight all the way back to win that game. They had no game control at all, and they were playing against mostly a backup quarterback and then a 3rd string quarterback, and that's the only team on their resume so far that they have played that's in the top 25. They don't have a single win over another team in the top 25. And they're going to play Texas, who's number 18, this week on the road, and they're a 7-point underdog. I don't understand. It's not worth getting worked up about because it's all going to change.
Doesn't matter.
But I don't.
Do you ever think that the committee ever gives a nod, like, okay, you can have it this week, but you're not getting in?
I mean, you know what? Honestly,
probably.
If they just came out and were like, yeah, we wanted to give Tennessee a week to celebrate being number 1 last week, because I had Tennessee at number 3. Like I thought Georgia was better even last week. So
because it just doesn't matter yet. And also when we're talking about TSU, their scoring margin is like less than half of Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan. There is a large jump between those two. And I think all you have to think about is what do we think would happen if Tennessee played TCU? And I have an opinion about that, but it doesn't matter right now because it's not going to be like this.
No.
So
I don't think TSU would hang with Ohio State or Michigan. I think
TSU definitely wouldn't.
Eddie George.
You said TSU.
You said TSU.
No, you said TSU and I repeated it. Oh, I did?
Yes, that's why I repeated it and made the joke. I said,
I thought I didn't notice I said it. All I noticed you said it, and then I made a joke about you making a joke about me making a joke.
Yeah, that's a joke inside a joke on top of another joke. That's pretty deep
Called
stuff
Inception.
Right there. Yeah, in Mike Price's Players Lounge. All right, so
all for a good time.
Georgia, Tennessee. She has not yet flicked me off yet. By the way, I'm just gonna let you guys know.
Yeah.
So Tennessee. Here's the thing. Like, Georgia had about 300 yards offense, 24 points, like 8+ yards per play in the first half. The weather comes in, and they definitely played complimentary football in the second half. This is why the loss is viewed by the committee as sort of not being as, again, I don't think it's as bad as Oregon.
It's not.
But it wasn't close. It was not a close game. They had 6 points for most of that game. Hendon Hooker did have some time to throw. I thought the Georgia secondary was extraordinarily good. They played physical press man coverage on the outside and dared him to go down the field. Tennessee had a couple of shots open. Hooker missed a few guys. Jalen Carter looks like the best player in the world. Tennessee's defense was okay. I don't think it's particularly good, so I don't think they could have done much better, even with the weather and Georgia taking the foot off the pedal a little bit. But there's some, I don't know what you make of the game itself, other than 2 weeks before the season started, I tried to tell people Georgia was underrated. Georgia is the beast. Georgia is Alabama this year. That they are the team that can just suffocate you and strangle the life out of you. And they're the best team in America. So
yeah, and I don't think that it's that they've not been able to do this earlier in the season. It just hasn't been. You haven't gotten to see it against a team that was ranked number 1 in the college football playoff rankings last week. And what they did was exactly what we said they would have to do last week. And there's like 2 main things, I think, which were, well, you might have had a couple ones, but a couple of different ones. But I think the main ones were you have to slow down the tempo of the game and control it. And then you have to try to prevent those really, really chunky plays, which is also kind of hand in hand with tempo, because the reason Tennessee's tempo is so fast is because they're able to make those big plays. Well, they weren't here. Georgia had 6 sacks in this game, which I think they've had 12 all season, and then 6 this particular game. Just everything that we talked about Georgia would have to do to make this game, to win, or to, I guess, make this game not even really that close. They were able to do. They were putting pressure on Hendon Hooker the whole time. It honestly, holding a team to not even score a touchdown until minute 55.
Yep.
And it's Tennessee.
That is why the committee views it as equally as dominating a performance by
because
Georgia.
Of what Tennessee's been able to do, and then Georgia limited exactly what Tennessee's been good at all season. Yeah,
it was the worst. The 2 worst rushing performances of Josh Heupel's Tennessee career were last year against Georgia and this year against Georgia. And I found it interesting, and this is all Kirby Smart's genius to some degree, and also just having better one-on-one matchups. Like, they won almost every one-on-one matchup for most of the game. Like, again, they'd be in a like, it was so fascinating watching Kirby Smart's defensive fronts in particular, because Jalen Carter was so dominant. But like, it was so weird. Tennessee would line up, they'd run the football into like a 6-man box, and then Georgia would immediately come back with like a 3-down lineman in a 5-man box. And it was almost like they were one step ahead the entire time in terms of their format. And even when Tennessee would catch them, they would run a linebacker out to cover a receiver and just mess with them at the line of scrimmage. And it wouldn't even the no yards after catch. Like, Georgia just, we kept asking last week, like, what does Georgia need to do to stop Tennessee? The question should have been the other way around.
Yeah, it should have been.
Like, we're Georgia, you adjust to us. We're Georgia. We don't adjust to you. You adjust to us.
I know. Maybe we just didn't give them enough credit, but I also think that it, not necessarily that Georgia had things that they kept in their back pocket, but I do think we saw things that Georgia hasn't really had to use.
Well, they took shots down the field and hit on like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
Stetson Bennett hit on a couple of big shots in the first half. They ran the ball. I mean, the first drive, they were picking up 10, 12 yards a carry. Like, it was pretty obvious Georgia was like, okay, we've had a lot of questions. People have raised some issues with our team so far this season.
Right.
And now we're going to show you all who we really are. and what a defending national champion looks like. It also, again, it helps that the best player probably in college football, Jalen Carter, was healthy and dominant. So
Right.
I think now, I think it's interesting that they have to go Florida, Tennessee, lots of emotional expenditure, turn around and go on the road to a fairly hostile and solid Mississippi State team. We talked about it all summer being like maybe the letdown game that we've seen. So now it's like, all right, Georgia, you've shown us who you really can be at your best. Let's see that Nick Saban consistency where we take the human element out of the equation. I'm curious what you think is going to happen with Mississippi State this weekend.
I don't think Georgia has a problem with Mississippi State. I think just Mississippi State has definitely had some like impressive showings throughout the season, but they are not the definition of consistency in my mind. Are they to you?
No, but I'm curious if like the weird stylistic offense of Mike Leach, a better than, average.
I think they'll put points up for sure.
Yeah. I just am curious. It's all about like Georgia emotionally wasn't ready for Missouri. They didn't get up for that game, obviously. Missouri had a solid game plan. So if they, for some reason, like, again, mentally are just a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds who are riding high off last week, you can get beat in this league. And on the road in a hostile place with loud cowbells and a lot of weird throws and a decent defense, styles make fights, like all this weird stuff. Like, I don't know. I think Mississippi State's going to give them a game for the first half, and then Georgia pulls away in the second half. But that's
and I don't think Georgia's going to ride high on emotion. They haven't been overly hyped this entire season, even when they deserve to be. So they haven't been riding on these like emotional highs, like Tennessee's up at number 1, and then I'm not even saying I don't even necessarily think that I don't think Tennessee's I don't really necessarily think that them hitting number 1 last week has anything to do with them being overly cocky or not performing as well as they would have hoped against Georgia. I do think it was, I'm going to go back in a second, but I do think it was, they had some mistakes. They had been there in a situation in a stadium that was extremely loud. They have lots of pre-snap infractions, just made mistakes that were based on the environment. And then, when you just Georgia team is pretty settled. It's kind of exactly what you just said a second ago. Like, we shouldn't have been asking Georgia how they're going to adapt to Tennessee. We should have had the question coming from the other direction. And I would say that to me, there is just there's a chaotic energy. Mississippi State does not feel locked up to me.
No, I agree. Mike Leach is folding up chairs on the sideline and like, did you see that?
Exactly. Yes. I'm like, what are we doing? It just in order to beat a Georgia team, you have to be completely locked in.
Yeah,
and if your head coach is folding chairs on the sideline
during the game,
talking about girlfriends still, did that happen again?
I don't know.
Resurface?
But he said, I don't remember what the exact quote is, but it doesn't matter because it's Mike Leach. It's great. He basically was like, he was asked about why he was folding up all the chairs and like throwing them down, and then the assistant comes behind him and like picks them all up, which is so funny. And it's like, well, yeah, they had everything but playing cards over there.
100%. Yeah, there's we don't even really, in my mind, have to go much further. It's too chaotic to beat a Georgia team. You're folding chairs. It's too much chaos. It's not gonna happen.
If your head coach is on the sideline folding chairs, you're not going to beat Georgia. That's science. That's science.
Yeah, that's on science.
That's
exactly.
Science. So listen, I also credit to the Georgia crowd. Like, that crowd is not always as rabid.
They were start to finish.
Yep, as like Neyland Wild or Baton Rouge Wild. They're not at, LSU. We're going to get to them in a second, but they registered on the Richter scale twice in the final minutes there with the touchdown and the 2-point conversion. I think that's the loudest from the folks that I've talked to, that's the loudest Sanford Stadium's ever sounded. Give them a lot of credit for being that extra rowdy. It happens when you're the defending champ. And again, I think the even Seth Emerson last week on the show was like, I'm not sure what Georgia is yet. Well, we certainly know now, and we should have known better. I'd like to think, because I picked Georgia and I picked LSU outright.
I picked the opposite, and I'm just going to admit it because that's who I am.
It's okay. And it's so funny because we had a big party and we had a bunch of families with kids over that were all Tennessee people, and everyone was so excited and happy. And I was such a Debbie Downer the whole time because I was like, they were like, I don't know anybody who hasn't picked Tennessee. And I'm like, everyone I trust and respect in the industry is picking Georgia. like Steven.
That was a direct jab at me, by the way.
No. That's not what it was, actually. I meant
everyone I respect. I just said
I know.
I picked Tennessee, and then you immediately said everyone I respect in the industry.
My apologies.
Georgia. No, it's fine.
What I meant was like Stephen Godfrey, Richard Johnson, Seth Emerson, like a lot of these people on the beat that cover college football all day, every day. That almost all of them were taking Georgia and laying the points.
And I did not feel confident about my, whatever. Keep going.
Now, I feel pretty good about saying last week on the pod, LSU outright on the money line at home against Alabama, gonna win. Now,
that was a good guess.
It took a 2-point conversion in overtime. What a
ballsy AF.
But like what?
But you kind of have to, right?
Totally. Brian Kelly spent his entire life not beating Alabama.
Right.
And now he's got LSU at home from 3 yards away with a quarterback who's red hot with a 50-50 chance, because that's about what the percentages are for 2-point conversions. If you told me that I'm a coach of any team in the world at any stage of my coaching career, that you can beat Alabama at home with a 1-3 yard gain, I would take most of the time. I would take that opportunity. And the 6 lead changes in the second half and back and forth, and Baton Rouge and Jaden Daniels was awesome in that game. Bryce Young was under pressure. LSU has gotten better and better. Like, just what a spectacular football game. And you saw Brian Kelly super emotional after the game.
Yep.
They now control their own destiny. They have to win tough games. They got to beat Arkansas on the road. They got to beat A&M, which is always quirky and weird.
Yeah. To
get there. But now they have the 2 wins over Ole Miss and Alabama, the tiebreaker. They'd have to lose another game, and Ole Miss would have to win out.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you. Like, again, I'm just happy Bama's not going to be in the playoff or the SEC championship game, hopefully. It's not that I don't like Nick Saban.
Let's check our target audience on the podcast before we start saying shit like that.
I just want to see some new stuff, man. I just want to see new stuff. Like,
nothing
I don't
against Bama.
And I've been totally wrong, and I'll say this to Neal later. Like, I was totally wrong about Ole Miss. Like, they still might lose a couple more games here, but they've been better than I expected pretty largely. South Carolina, better than I expected for most of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see Ole Miss and Tennessee play in Atlanta. That'd be great. And it's not – I'm fine with LSU Georgia. That'd be a great game. I think Georgia would win, but like,
yeah.
I think it's good for the sport.
But it would be exciting because right now, like, we didn't know what LSU was at the beginning of the season. We definitely did not think they were this. And then what are they going to be by the time, the game – by the time the SEC championship rolls around? Like, we don't know. I mean, I did not expect this, but I will say, I love that I took a bite of a granola bar during.
I know. Why did you eat right before making a very
bro?
This sounds like such a really smart, thoughtful, nuanced point you're about to make.
Okay, well, let me finish chewing.
Cinnamon. Bubbles. Okay. Bubbles to the main stage. Bubbles.
Oh, fuck off. I was gonna say is that LSU, okay, well, on a more top level, like Alabama's defense just could not figure out a way to get a stop late, and LSU was able to capitalize on that and just did not give up. But what the difference to me in this game is, for the first time, because we haven't seen a lot of Brian Kelly and LSU, because we don't have that many games under our belt at this point, his trust in his players. And when you're playing Alabama and you're close, coaches, just as anyone would, want to latch on and try to control everything and just bear down and flex and close their eyes and hope they can do it. He didn't do that. He trusted his guys' skill sets, which, by the way, I think Connor, is it O'Gara, Saturday Down South, maybe tweeted this out.
Yeah.
I might be saying his last name wrong. Tweeted out that Brian Kelly had more 5 stars on this roster than he did in his last 6 seasons at Notre Dame combined, which is pretty impressive. So I'm not saying that to take away from his trust in his player. He's obviously putting trust in guys that are highly capable. But to be able to do that when you're that close against Alabama, no matter how good your guys are, because it's a life-changing, career-changing, program-changing win, it is rare. And he trusted his guys, and the 2-point conversion, you can say it's necessary because it's hindsight. In the moment, it was ballsy.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, just to me, I've now seen what the potential of Brian Kelly and his relationship with these guys and with LSU and what it could be. And he was the most human we've seen him in a minute.
I think you're right to point out how much he allows his people to work. And I think the lesson and the message coming out of Baton Rouge since the win has largely been about how consistent he still is to them today as he was before the game. Like the win hasn't changed the message, hasn't changed how he operates. And again, that is the Nick Saban remove the human element from this experience, excuse me. Like this is what coaching 18 to 22-year-olds is all about. They are, and Neal and I talk about this later, like they are emotional, they are young, some of them are immature. Consistency is the problem, and it is the foe. It is the opponent in college football, consistency. Mm-hmm. And staying even, right? Staying right here. And
in the middle, yeah.
And Brian Kelly, that's like the message out of Baton Rouge all week this week, going into a very tricky Arkansas game in which now everything is on the line for them. So totally different dynamic for LSU now. The stories are like, man, he hasn't changed the message. He hasn't changed how he's talking to us. He hasn't changed anything. It's exactly how it was going into the Alabama game. And that
makes sense.
That's how you maintain consistency.
The motion, I guess I'm talking about, in case I need to clear confusion, was after the game. And I think that I don't mean
he was he was like crying.
Yeah, if you have a system down that works and you do trust in your guys, then the way that you handle a play going into halftime should be the same way that you handle a play like late in the game. It's you have a system, you stick right there, you never get too high or too low. Of course, that's not the same when you have to take a 2-point conversion to try to win the game. That's different. But it seems like a fit, and it's working.
Yeah, he's a very good coach. Like we all joke.
I never thought that he was. I never said he wasn't.
Exactly. Like I think the internet laughed at him for some silly stuff that happened early on in his the getting in, integrated into the culture of Baton Rouge and Louisiana. Like we all had our jokes and laughed about the accent and the fishing and like you've never caught a fish before, like all this other shit. But like the dude has always been a good football coach everywhere he's been. Like you don't pass Newt Rockne on accident at Notre Dame.
No, and just the talent that he has is like they're wrangling the talent.
Well, and you said it there when you talked about the 5 stars. Like this is why Brian Kelly left Notre Dame for LSU, because the upside of LSU is higher than Notre Dame.
Yeah,
that's it.
The ceiling is higher. Yep.
You can win the national title, and it's hard. You just can't probably do it at Notre Dame. Now, I can hear Alabama fans being like, "Wait a second, you want something new, but you're going to go with LSU?" Like LSU's been around a lot, and they've 2019 and 2013 and 2011 they're in the national championship, or not 2013, 2007, 2003. Like they've won their fair share of championships, right? Like
they have a way to make it messy in between, though.
That's true. So
the kid that like room is perfectly clean, and then they go and pull the blocks out and just dump them on the floor. Yep. It's like it was so good before.
Yep.
What happened?
Mason Taylor, awesome game for him. Jaden Daniels made a couple of just perfect throws, like the back end zone line throw to Taylor was unbelievable. And this speaks to what you're talking about, trusting your guy. Like the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, the offensive line, and the head coach have all gotten better as the season has gone along, understanding the system, calling the system, trusting the quarterback to make the right decision. It just all is there, and it culminates with Jaden Daniels scoring on one play in overtime. Like, I'm just going to run it from 25 yards out. That's fine. Like, I'm good.
Shit.
And then they trusted him to get on the edge and throw the out route, and if it's not there, to try to do something with his legs, because that is the play caller, the head coach, the quarterback, all understanding each other better today than they did against Florida State in week 1.
Like, just incomprehensibly so.
Yep. Now, does this mean LSU can win out and get to the SEC championship game? Because they got a tricky one coming up with Arkansas. But before we talk next week's games, week 11 got lots of stuff to do. Neal McCready coming up as well from Rebel Grove, covering all things Old Mississippi. Some thoughts on Lane Kiffin's future, the matchup with Alabama, which should be a really fun game, by the way. 11.5 point spread. I'll get your thoughts on what you think is going to happen. But before we do, make sure you remember that Fringe Element is brought to you by
J. Dunn.
That's right.
They gone and... Do you think they should change their tagline to "Gone and Done It"?
Wow.
No marketing major, but
I'm the one with kids, for the record. I'm the one who writes dad jokes in my kids' lunchbox every single day.
A pun is normally your thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you want?
Most strippers don't use puns. People don't know that.
Strippers.
Okay, we're not talking about this in the J.E. Dunn ad. We're not doing it.
JEDunn.com, everybody. Strippers are not wordsmiths.
What were you about to say?
What did one plate say to the other plate?
I can't imagine.
Dinner's on me.
It's so dumb.
I got so many more. It's so bad.
we gotta watch the time codes when people drop off. It's at the podcast. It's like right now.
So
it's
bad.
The exact time code.
No, we're gonna talk about Auburn and Dan Lanning and who's gonna be the coach at Auburn. And Neal McCready's great. Don't go anywhere. When you're an American when you go into the bathroom, you're an American when you leave the bathroom. What are you when you're in the bathroom?
Should I be able to get this?
No.
Okay. What is it?
European.
So stupid. So
I have
dumb.
to write. I put one in my daughter's lunchbox every day. I go full Ryan McGee.
Dad joke. I love Ryan McGee.
I'm going full Ryan McGee, who does the same thing for his kids. He and I've talked about it before. I go full Ryan McGee every day on the kiddo's lunchbox.
I love that.
Like, what did one wall say to the other wall? Meet you at the corner.
So God.
Just so bad.
Does Marin think they're funny?
No, it's for the younger. It's for the 4-year-old. It's for the
Did she read?
No, but her little preschool teacher reads them to her, and she cackles like a hyena. I don't even know if she gets them. I don't even know.
She just thinks it's funny that you like write something stupid on a piece of paper every day.
I think so. It's supposed to be a love note, like, which also is a dumb thing, but like, I don't know how every single day. How can you write a love note to your kid every single day and come up with something fresh and original? So I just started writing dad jokes.
That works too.
It's way funny. It's way better. Go to J.E. Dunn, by the way.
You care as much as J.E. Dunn does. There you go. I'll get you back in it.
JEDunn.com. Top 100 healthiest place to work in the United States. $5 billion in annual revenue. Offices all across the Southeast. Just they care about their people. And if you need to find some inspiration in your workplace or you want a career change, I know there's so many of us that need that right now, including both of us apparently. Go to JEDunn.com and check it out. See what they got.
I keep making things up and like doing new challenges on this podcast today because I'm feeling froggy. But what if
TCU was ranked number 4?
There you go. If someone listening to the podcast applies at J.E. Dunn and gets the job, tells them that Fringe Element sent them, and Braden will write you a note every day for 365 days.
No, not on weekends.
Okay.
I'm busy. Every school or
work day, Braden will write you either a love note or
I won't.
A dad joke.
I can write dad jokes.
Braden, make this worthwhile for J.E. Dunn. Give him some love.
I'm pretty sure it's disincentivizing people going to work at J.E. Dunn. Like, I don't want this weird podcast guy sending me notes. That's weird. I'd rather have the stripper do that.
Stripper will not be using her words.
Everyone would much rather have love notes from a stripper. It's obvious.
I was going to really try to leave strippers out of this particular J.E. Dunn ad, but here we are.
All right. Neal McCready coming up in a little bit. LSU at Arkansas. This has been a one-score game, 3 out of the last 4. I didn't realize this. I guess it makes sense. Arkansas has not won against LSU in Fayetteville since 2014.
Really?
Arkansas is losing at home to LSU all the time. And now, obviously, Chad Morris's tenure, they were really, really bad. And last year was an overtime win for Pittman, but in Baton Rouge. So
right.
I think LSU has what it takes to get to the SEC championship game to win out. But at the same time, nothing is guaranteed. They are only a 3-point favorite. This is still a flawed team. They're not as good as Georgia and Tennessee, in my opinion. We saw that when they played Tennessee. So this is still a flawed team. We'll get to what we think of like Alabama and what they're going to be in the future. But I could absolutely see LSU losing this game and throwing the entire thing into chaos. So,
yeah, I mean, I do think that there are some challenges. I think that, LSU is, Alabama does have like a pretty highly ranked secondary. So even if LSU's, even if Jaden Daniels is able to connect with his receivers, it's not, it's not just getting it past them. There's actually still challenges, even when you're able to get the ball down the field. And LSU, but LSU does have some momentum, like winning 3 straight. They have been better rushing the ball on the ground. It is going to be, it's hard to think that this game is going to, you just saw LSU knock off Bama. So in people's minds, if you're not digging all the way into this, it's like, why is the spread against Arkansas only 3? But this game,
Das Boot rivalry. Yeah.
Yeah. It's become one. What is it? The I-65 thing that
Well,
Godfrey always talks about.
Yeah, well, no, it's the Golden Boot or whatever. Like it looks like
No, that's A&M LSU. I don't know why.
Yeah. No, I-10 is the A&M
I-10.
LSU thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my issue. Arkansas is ahead of only Vanderbilt in defense in the SEC this year. 6.4 yards per play allowed on defense, and that was on display against Liberty last weekend when Liberty, they made a comeback or whatever. But that's not a good showing at home. Like I know Liberty's pretty good. They're 1 2-point conversion away from being undefeated and being, again, they're not ranked by the committee, but they probably could be ranked by the committee. That's a really, really good team. Hugh Freeze was auditioning for the Auburn job, which we'll get to in a second. But my issue is LSU's confidence on offense right now has never been higher, and Arkansas doesn't feel like they are equipped to stop LSU. So while I think they could win and think they could pull an upset, and the point spread says it's going to be close, to me it's almost more about the one thing we know Jaden Daniels can do, which is in control of the offense and run around and make plays. Arkansas, that's what they don't do well on defense. So I think it's going to be close. I just think at the end of the day, LSU does something to score and win late because their offensive line is their big question, and I don't think Arkansas has got the horses to take advantage of that. Right, at least not right now. So
no, it's been like a little. I know Arkansas is disappointed, and I would have loved to see this year go better for them, but I do still think they've got some good things in place. I just don't think it's going to be enough to knock off LSU, especially with the momentum they have and confidence they have and what they've been able to do on offense. So I'm with you on that.
Not to mention, we forgot to mention this. Tennessee will play Missouri, of course. Eli Drinkwitz gets the extension. The weird play at the end of that Missouri-Kentucky game was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
If you don't know, it's about 2.5 minutes to go. Kentucky's up by 4. They're punting the ball back to Missouri. Goes over the punter's head. He runs back to get it like 35 yards inside his own 10. And when he turns to kick the ball, he gets hit by the linebacker. Actually gets hurt on it. The ball goes out of bounds like before the line of scrimmage. But they ruled it roughing the kicker, even though the ball had technically the snap had been fumbled, hit the ground, rolled around. They ruled that he was still inside the pocket. So it was a roughing. And so Kentucky runs the clock out. Just one of the most painful ways you could lose a game. But Eli gets a 2-year extension. They should have beaten Auburn. You could argue they had a chance to beat Kentucky. I don't think they have a chance to beat Tennessee this weekend. I think Tennessee is going to take out some frustrations on them at home. But we forgot to mention that coming out of the Tennessee conversation that Eli Drinkwitz gets an extension. So do you like the extension? What do you think?
I mean, I think he makes sense for them. I think he sees himself at Missouri for a long time and wants to really make a difference there. And it's kind of, to me, I think they've got like a little bit of a Mark Stoops mentality of like, this is working and we've had like a slow build, but it is, we are heading in the right direction and he aligns with our values and the guys like him, guys play for him. So can we do what Kentucky did by just trying to build up to 8 or 9 wins over the course of, 7-8 years? So I think it makes sense for them.
I think that's the exact right comp because patience and investment is what Kentucky did right with Mark Stoops. And clearly Eli's recruiting pretty well. You got to win you got to finish those games. Like you finish the Auburn game, you're going to a bowl game. You finish the Kentucky game, you're going to a bowl game. Really good win against South Carolina. I think one of the things that's most interesting, and you talked about sort of the guys buying in, like if 30 recruits or something like that decided, like 15, 20 guys decide to leave in the offseason, maybe I change my opinion on the culture being bad. But like right now, you're not hearing any of that, like Butch Jones nonsense at Tennessee, where like everyone's like, oh, it's a complete mess. It's a dumpster fire. It's dysfunctional. People are leaving like Auburn last year. Right. That's not at all what's happening at Missouri. And frankly, they were 13th in the SEC in defensive efficiency last year. Yeah. They are 3rd this year. They have made huge improvements on that side of the ball. So
yeah, I think it makes sense for them. I think it's a school like Missouri that doesn't have the glitz and glam of some of these other SEC schools. You need a long haul guy, and Eli Drinkwitz believes in it. He wants to do it, and you got to give people time at schools like this. If you're not in that top tier or middle or top of the middle tier of the SEC, you have to have patience.
Yep. I agree with that. Alabama, real quickly here, they are number 9. They probably do not have a path to Atlanta or the playoff, although number 9 with 2 losses on basically the final play of the game to 2 teams ranked number 5 and number 7. Yeah. That's a pretty damn good resume for Alabama. How concerned, like, I think one of the major issues is, I mean, they don't have the offensive line or the receiving core that they had in the past, certainly not in 2020, where they had like 14 NFL Hall of Famers. But I think Bill O'Brien is. I think Alabama fans are rooting hard for Bill O'Brien to take a job somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I I don't think this is anything permanent for Alabama. The obituary for the Saban dynasty has been written 1,000 times and it's been wrong every time. So I'm not doing that. I'm just sort of refreshed by seeing something different.
Yeah.
And I think they work out these problems. I just don't think they're going to work them out this year. So,
Well, I think working them out, like the ceiling when you're Alabama, it doesn't work out unless you end up in those top 4 spots. And like working out
yep.
doesn't look like 5, 6, 7, 8. It looks like 1,
Yep.
2, 3, or 4, and then
Yep.
once you get there, it probably looks like winning. So I do think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Nick Saban does not waste time. So what I will say is that you're not going to see them piss away the rest of the season because they're not winning. They're not potentially not going to get a playoff spot or probably won't get one. They will continue to use every practice and every game to prepare for the rest of the season
Yep.
and for next season. It will not be a slack off and start over situation. It'll keep going down the exact same path that it always does.
Now, if they've got to do it with the same problems next year and they don't have Bryce Young, I know they've got 5 stars lined up at every position. Again, maybe it's a 2-year process here for Nick. I don't know. We haven't seen this type of team with this lack of discipline, right? Like the penalties and the mistakes. And frankly, I talk about this with Neal, but like the mental toughness of this team was questioned last year, and that's why Saban went so soft on him. I think that's a concern moving forward without Bryce Young.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, to your point, like it's Alabama. They're going to be great. I do think that the Bama fatigue is real around the country, that people outside of the SEC are tired of Bama, that everyone's tired of, like, everyone's relieved that they're not going to be a part of the playoff this year. And there's a chance with Clemson losing this weekend that Clemson and Bama are both out, which would be the first playoff ever that one of those two didn't make it. So I think there's some like excitement about new blood getting in there. But at the same time, I do think that level of fatigue like blocks people's brains from using critical thinking about Alabama. Like they still have they have a road win over number 18 Texas. They lost on a 2-point conversion in overtime to number 7 on the road. They lost because they missed a field goal and Tennessee made a field goal to number 5 on the road. They beat Arkansas with a backup quarterback. They beat A&M with a backup quarterback. Like, I think they're going to go into Ole Miss this weekend and hammer them. So, like, I still think people are, oh, they've lost twice. They're not very good. And I'm like, no, they're not very good for Bama standards.
Yeah.
Like,
and other teams that aren't normally as good are better.
They would still like crush the ACC Coastal, the Big 10 West, the Big 12. Like, they would win the Big 12. Like, let's just be honest about, I think Bama fatigue blocks your brain from like being able to accurately analyze Alabama.
I agree. And on the same topic of fatigue, expectations of perfection are also extremely exhausting for athletes and coaches.
Yeah, it's true.
So there is fatigue in the sense that if we do not win, we did not succeed. And it is really freaking hard to win a championship in college football. So I do think that if there is no other silver lining, if you're an Alabama fan, A, it's not, no time is wasted. And B, there will be an extra excitement and gratitude of these guys coming back in, of what it feels like to be on top again, because we know they'll be there.
Neal McCready and I had a very long conversation about, I think those are good points, by the way. Neal McCready, really long conversation about the Ole Miss Bama game, the matchup this weekend, the history of the rivalry, and a lot about where Lane Kiffin's sort of like true hopes and dreams lie. Is he interested in Auburn? Is he interested in the NFL? Would he be interested in leaving Ole Miss? Maybe not. Why maybe he wants to stay. A lot of interesting stuff from Neal on this conversation, but it leads us into the Auburn situation because Liberty, Hugh Freeze, obviously is a name that Auburn fans want. He just goes on the road and beats Arkansas in like the most obvious job audition in the history of the world. How would you feel if Hugh Freeze, with all of his history and baggage, with all the weirdness at Liberty and the pool boys and all the weird stuff at Liberty, she's rolling her eyes. If you don't know, just dive into Liberty and pool boys if you want. Check that out.
Won't take
has nothing to do with
much.
It has nothing to do with Hugh Freeze specifically. It's just sort of course, that story came out where Hugh Freeze was coaching. What would you think if he's named the head coach at Auburn? Do you think Auburn's like trying to rekindle some weird ghost that ended up in a NCAA violation? Like, can Hugh Freeze? He's obviously a damn good coach. Like,
it's a very good coach. Yeah. You know, I think he's more likable. I think when people know him one-on-one, players loved him. I mean, he coached at a high school in Memphis. Like all of my close guy friends played for him in high school. I mean, he was definitely a player's coach. They liked him. I mean, I think that for the
Oh,
administration, they're like,
I bet he was a player's coach.
yeah. Okay,
I
stop.
mean,
So the
well, no, I mean
administration,
strippers and hundies, like Laquan Treadwell was
true, but I don't think he was doing that for the high school guys. I hope.
look, it was all about recruiting. Now, again, also, I don't care if athletes get paid money. Like, I don't like in recruiting, that ship
Yeah.
has sailed a long time ago.
Right.
Was it against the rules then? Sure. Did he break the rules? Fine. To me, what I didn't like about Hugh Freeze was
There's some serious problems.
Right. It's these self-righteous accusations of other people having the audacity to think you did something wrong when you were doing all of it.
Right.
Like,
it was like just a tactic. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like, don't
I'd be
bold-face
nervous.
me, you know?
I'd be very nervous to hire him
Yes.
if I was upper admin at Auburn. I will say that. All that being said, Auburn, I think, really wants to win. Do they care enough to keep Hugh Freeze out of the position? I don't know, because I continue to be surprised about truly what Auburn fans will do and say and be in order to win. So I can't put it past them.
Nick Saban's a hell of a drug.
Yes.
No question about that. By the way, Cadillac Williams, this guy,
I mean, loved every second of that.
Never gonna get the job, but maybe one day. But just like how he talks to his players, how they interact with him, his career path to go from like, what was it, like high school coach like 6 years ago to now being the interim head coach at his alma mater, like just a cool story.
So cool.
And those dudes, we've said this all season, those kids fight their ass off, man. Mm-hmm. Give the Auburn roster and those players to deal with all the crap they've dealt with. Now to take Mississippi State to overtime. I know they didn't win the game. They didn't win. You know, they're not winning the games, and they're going to play A&M this week. And maybe
but they're not throwing the towel in, is what you're saying, because they had every reason. They had no structure. Things were going to shit. The coaching staff was not working. The coaching staff wouldn't get along with each other or the players or anything.
Yep.
And when they got on the field, they were still trying to finish, even if they didn't end up doing that. And that's very hard to do when they had every reason to have morale on the floor.
And you watch like NFL interim coaches get jobs, and you can tell that they're auditioning for a job. Mm-hmm. And it's not the same as like a running backs coach who's got zero experience coaching at his alma mater. Like that is a different story.
It is.
He's not odd. I mean, in his head and his heart, does he want the job? Of course. He's not really a candidate. But so what he's doing is doing it for the love of his players in the university, and that's not a thing that happens in professional sports. It's just.
I mean, you can't really fake how he was acting on the sidelines. I mean, he probably ran a marathon just up and down the sidelines while Mike Leach was folding chairs.
Dan Lanning, Oregon coach, because all the Auburn talk is you need an SEC man, Southeastern man who knows this conference and has been in this conference. And Dan Lanning, of course, was on the Alabama staff and that super famous 2015 coaching staff. He was the Georgia defensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach at Oregon, number 6 in the nation. He basically at a press conference this week said, "I am not interested in the job ever. Why would I ever leave here?" Which is always famous last words. But then my favorite part was he went on to say there's a problem in society.
Can you tell me the context of that again?
He's like, people are leaving jobs too early in the professional world, and it's a problem in society. Basically,
not unless if you work at J.E. Dunn, that's not true.
No, because you stay there for long periods of time because they're committed to you, jedunn.com. Right. But Dan Lanning's only been there 1 year. Oregon has had a lot of this happen to them. Willie Taggart was there and then left for Florida State. Mario Cristobal was there, felt like it was going to be a while, left for Miami to come back home. Dan Lanning is a Southeastern Conference guy, and he checks some Alabama boxes. I don't think my question about Dan Lanning is that he had an already constructed roster recruited by a high-level recruiter in Mario Cristobal. He stepped into an already made team. I think it is a risky move for Auburn to target Dan Lanning. While he does check some boxes, he is still largely unproven as a head coach in terms of building a program. So problems in society, Dukes.
Do you think that
from a coach in a profession where they change jobs every day?
He's like, yeah. He's like,
it's the worst profession in the world. I
also would like world peace. No, that seems like a very odd blanket statement to me.
So funny.
Because as soon as you had just like a better negotiated contract, you're gone.
Like he won a national championship.
Now what he could have said is, I do feel like there's a culture of schools and programs giving up on coaches before they have time to make a difference.
Ooh.
That would have been different. But to say like people leave too quick, it's like, well, if someone gives you a higher check, you're going too.
Right, and the coaching profession is worse than like almost any other profession in our country right now in terms of
Not
like
strippers.
Strippers never leave. They're very committed to their audience.
I was gonna say they bounce around a lot, but I don't really know. I've had the same job.
I see what you did there. They bounce around a lot. Strippers, I get it.
I didn't mean it like that. I hate this episode. Can we get out of it?
Rate, review, subscribe, share the show.
I run a company now, and then this is going to be the clip on social, so that's good. Win some, you lose a lot.
Strippers bounce around. So we'll see. John Cohen had his opening statement. I think he said everything he needed to say as the AD of Auburn. Like, hey, it's the most important thing in the world. He did hire Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State. Bad decision. Hired Mike Leach at Mississippi State. Probably a good decision. So that's kind of all we have to go on with him in terms of football. So I think that about covers it. Texas A&M and Florida. Nice win for Florida on the road. Anthony Richardson, Billy Napier. You can see the work developing there. They'll play South Carolina. Congrats to South Carolina. Sorry, Dugs, for getting bowl eligible. So they are now bowl eligible. And South Carolina and Florida will play this week in what will probably amount to a very important pecking order game in terms of bowls and money and everything in the East. So that's going to be an interesting game. And A&M Auburn, holy shit, who knows? That game's weird.
I have no clue.
That game's weird. When you don't have a 5-game losing streak and A&M's fighting for bowl eligibility in a losing season, and Auburn's got a running back coach as its head coach, and that's just a sit back and watch the.
I truly can't. I can't even speculate. I'm not going to. Yeah. I have no idea. Do you know what the spread is?
It is a 2-point spread for Auburn, so it sounds about right at home.
Yeah, Vegas doesn't know either. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Florida 7.5-point favorite at home, so there you go. Kentucky 17.5. We haven't touched on Kentucky much, but they get to a bowl game. They're 17.5-point favorite over Vanderbilt, so they'll probably get a win there. Sorry, Dugs.
It's all right. I'm a realist.
Otherwise, it's all about Ole Miss and Bama. In which case, let's get to our guest. Mercifully, after all the stripper talk, here was our great and wonderful and thoughtful and nuanced and adult and professional conversation with the Rebel Grove's Neal McCready.
Yeah, that's on me.
Neal, good to see you, man. Welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I am great. Appreciate you having me, Braden, as always.
Yep. So obviously, tiny game this weekend in Oxford. We'll discuss. We also have Lane Kiffin, his future, which you and I have also discussed in the past, the state of the program, where it's all heading. But I got to start by just apologizing to old Mississippi fans by saying they weren't going to be as good, that they were. I had the under 7.5. I said it on your show. I've talked to you about it before. So I just got to apologize right here on the front end and put my hand up and be accounted for and say, look, Lane Kiffin has done an excellent job so far with his team.
Yeah. I mean, look, I had him at 8-4. And I said that if you told me I was off a game, I'd go 7-5. I guess they could still go 8-4. I could still go, see, I told you. I had them losing to Kentucky and beating Arkansas. So if I end up being right, I'm going to get those two wrong. I think they're going better than 8-4. I think 9-3 right now is the floor. I think 10-2 is likely, and obviously 11-1 is possible. But yeah, I was wrong too, and I'm around him all the time. So look, he's a terrific coach. He's different. And I think people get hung up in him being a different guy, right? They get hung up in all the social media stuff. And then in person, he's just really quiet, aloof. Like in press conferences, you can hardly hear him. He just kind of talks like this. It's just whatever.
I got a Pilates appointment later today. Okay.
I just got back from Pilates. I'm going again. And then, got a dog. I got a dog. I'm going to make fun of people. I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to make fun of myself. But, I got fired at USC. I mean, it's just funny. And you forget in all of that is that he's an offensive genius. He's a genius. The stuff they script early in games. Listen, I sit in the press box and watch it, and I'm not a football nerd. I wish I were. I wish I understood it better than I do. I'm getting better, but I'm watching it going, wow, that's impressive. Like, how do you think of that week after week after week against brilliant defensive people? And he tricks them.
We're going to run a speed option off to the short side of the field that then turns into an RPO that is a sideline wheel route to a running back.
Yeah, and 1 week they throw for 500 yards, and the next week they run for 500 yards. It's the damnedest thing, and you watch it and you go, the guy's a genius. And then the other thing that he does, I don't think he gets enough credit for this because we get so hung up on his personality. He took a lot of Pete Carroll coaching style and found a way to integrate it with Nick Saban's coaching style. And he made his own kind of unique. Now, it's more Saban-esque. I asked him about it yesterday. I was like, I'm curious. You grew up in a house with a legendary defensive coordinator in the NFL. You coached for Pete Carroll for 6 years. You worked with Saban for 3. What is it about Saban that was so instrumental in you becoming kind of who you are? And he was like, I don't know, it's recency and it's maybe geography a little bit. Coach Saban did it in the SEC and blah, blah, blah. But I think the answer, honestly, was, I don't know. It happened organically. I took some stuff from Carroll. I took some stuff from Saban. I took some stuff from my own failures and kind of got comfortable in my own skin. And here we are.
I'm willing to bet, and now we're like off topic, just riffing here, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of what Saban, like Lane's personal growth or football growth or whatever you want to call it, a lot of it is that Saban just has ultimate levels of trust. Like he has a really high bar of trust for you to get into the organization, but once you're in, he leaves you alone to do your job, and sort of it allows you to probably grow in your own way. He certainly did that with the offense with Lane when he said, hey, Lane, go solve my offensive problems. And he did it. So then what is it about this team? What is it about this group of guys, whether it's Jackson Dart, who clearly Lane wasn't sold on all the way from the beginning, but has a ton of ability. He's been running the ball like crazy. Like you said, they can go either direction on offense. What is it then that has made this team better than, I'll just say me, that I expected? Why is it that they've been able to sustain after all the losses from last season?
Offensively, they kind of maximize what they have. He just has the ability to, I'll tell you, one of the games, this is going to, if you're not careful, you'll let me go off on crazy riff. One of the games that really stands out in my mind is a game that they lost at the end of 2020 at LSU. Elijah Moore declared for the draft, basically. Kenny Yeboah had done the same for whatever reason. They had some injuries, and Matt Corral's out there. And first half, Matt throws 3 picks, and look like they're about to get run out of Tiger Stadium. It was a COVID year, so it was different. Tiger Stadium wasn't crazy like it was the other night, but still, it's Baton Rouge. It was in the rain, and in the second half, they just come up with this offensive system with a bunch of dudes that had hardly played all year, and they're just lighting them up. I mean, it's like Dennis Jackson and Casey Kelly and all these people. Like, what in the hell is this? I mean, they came back and almost won the game. The game was in the 50s. It was 50-something, whatever. And I was like, man, this guy, he just figures it out. Like, you hand him some stuff, and he's like, okay, so I'm gonna do this, and it works. And they've done that offensively. I mean, they got 2 freshman tackles right now. They moved the tackles to guard. You mentioned Dart. I think Dart's played really well. Kiffin's a very good quarterbacks coach. Always has been. They've got real talent in the secondary. The young freshman, Quinshon Judkins, is just a terrific player.
Yeah.
He just had a spectacular season. They really haven't had Ulysses Bentley IV all year. They haven't had Zach Evans as much as they thought they'd have him. Their receiving core hasn't been what I think they thought it would be. It's been very thin. They got nothing really out of Jalen Robinson, and going into the season, they thought he was going to be a really big part of their offense. Michael Trigg's hurt. He hadn't played since Vanderbilt with the collarbone, and they just find different ways to score. And then defensively, look, it's been covering up gaping wounds with the Band-Aid, and you can sort of see the blood, creeping out, but they've been able to stop it from just, hemorrhaging. And so, look, here's the crazy part. And I said this to you before we started, and you probably could have been nice and not called me on it, but I'm going to say it out loud. I still don't know how good this team is.
That's why we play the games, baby.
They've played 9 games. They were a heartbeat away from losing to Kentucky. They played really well for a quarter and a half or so against LSU, and then the bottom fell out. They played with their food a little bit against Texas A&M, but they won the game. Looking back, their win over Troy looks better than we thought it did.
Yeah.
The Tulsa team they beat is not a bad team. They trailed Vanderbilt at halftime. I don't know what they are. I mean, but here's what they are. They're 8-1.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of teams nationally that would trade places with them. And so, they've got a chance. They go into November with a chance, which is more than a lot of people can say. Hell, frankly, as crazy as this sounds, they go into November with a chance, which is something the team that they're about to play Saturday can't say.
Yeah, that's true. Although that LSU game in 2020, I'm sure Bo Pelini had nothing to do with all of that offense in the second half by Ole Miss. Nothing to do with it at all.
Not.
Old Bo. Which coordinator? They lose both coordinators in the offseason, highly talked about. DJ Durkin's over at A&M. They run for 400 yards against him last week, so that but Lane Kiffin probably didn't hate that too much. Which new coordinator, because we know it's Lane's offense, but we know, and again, the defense, as you pointed out, over 6.5 yards per play on average the last three games. The last three games, like you said, I think it's a great analogy. You can see the blood starting to seep through the wound a little bit. Which coordinators had a bigger impact on the team?
Oh, I think it's probably Partridge on defense. They've changed personality a little bit. He did a really good job early, and it's not that he's suddenly doing a bad job now. It doesn't work like that. He's just had some injuries, and Cedric Johnson hasn't been all that impactful off the edge because of his ankle. Troy Brown in the middle, the linebacker, has been playing through a pretty rough shoulder injury. They've had some guys in the secondary go down, but they don't have some depth there anymore, and that got exposed a little bit because they didn't ever have a bunch of great coverage guys at safety. They just had some physical guys and look, the other team gets paid to coach too, and those guys scout as well on the other side, and they've found the weaknesses and they're picking at them. They're picking at that scab, if you will, and that's maybe one of the reasons you see some of the blood leaking out. So, it's a constant chess match at this point of the year. It's also a health thing. Troy Brown didn't play in the second half at LSU, and you could see his absence was glaring on the field. So, but I think it's Partridge because at the end of the day, and this is nothing against Charlie Weiss Jr. It's just that's Lane's offense.
Let's just get Partridge like a longer shirt. That's all I ask. If you look at the matchup then with Alabama, they give up almost 70 2 years ago. Last year was he clearly, he had the thing before the game, which I don't really make too much of. He was just,
that's not why they lost.
Yeah, he's just being lame. But he clearly he was confident and they wanted to be aggressive. They were going for it on fourth down early. That was a better Bama team than it is this year. It's on the road. It can snowball quickly. So what is it about the way they're built? Maybe it's Jackson Dart's running ability. I mean, certainly Matt Corral was great at that last year, but they haven't been really in this game the last 2 years with Lane. Some of that is that I'm assuming I don't buy into the Nick Saban is vengeful kind of guy thing, because I think his whole entire business model is to keep it as even as possible and as consistent as possible. But what is it about?
Lane's the same way,
right? So where are the matchups? Where are the areas? Because Alabama has plenty of flaws here. Yeah. 11-point spread, give or take, depending on when you're listening to this. They're at home. We've seen, we know the history between these two over the last 10 years. Where are the matchups where Ole Miss can win this game?
They've consistently run the ball when they've wanted to run the ball. Can Alabama take away the run? Well, if they can, this game's going to get out of hand quick, because I don't think Ole Miss is good enough to just light you up in the secondary with, they did Vanderbilt, but this is not Vanderbilt. They can run the football. Judkins is good. I think Evans is going to be back this week. If you told me they get something out of Bentley this week, I'll buy it. And Dart is very effective with his feet. That's their opportunity. You run the football, you score some points running the ball early. You get Alabama cheating a little bit against the run, and then maybe you get a 101 and you win it with Jonathan Mingo or something. Maybe this is the week that you get something out of Jalen Robinson. Maybe Michael Trigg comes back. I don't think so, but maybe. Defensively, it's not a great matchup. Listen, this is not a great matchup, period. I mean, I'm trying to come up with a way to make it a great matchup for Ole Miss, and it's hard to do. if I'm Alabama, I'm like, hey, here's Jahmyr Gibbs. Get to know him because you're going to see him a lot. Here's the question, though. Maybe you can help me here. The psychology of this. Because I know we like to do this thing about Alabama's a machine. Alabama's a collection of robots. No, they're not. They're kids. They're people. They're very businesslike. They're people. This is the first time in a long time, first time for any of these kids that they've played a game in that uniform that's inconsequential. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's one thing, right, to say, hey, we're playing for the national championship every week. Okay, cool. Hey, we're trying to get to the Citrus Bowl.
Yeah, I think no, I think it's a great question. And we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. I don't know. I don't have any metrics to say that this is one of his more like mentally weak teams, because I don't first of all, I just don't love attacking mental toughness for young kids.
Oh, of course.
But the lack of discipline is so apparent. And I think, again, and I just think Nick said it out loud, and Alabama people said it out loud about last year's team. The reason they were so soft on that team publicly was because they were not mentally as tough as he needed them to be to win the championship. And again, even that team lost in the national title game. So I think you're right. And part of Saban's beauty and part of what has made him great is what we just talked about, is taking the 18 to 22-year-old and removing the human element from it. Like, that's his job, is to turn them into robots. And the question is, can he do it now when they are the third team in the division? Like that is, or at least
I'd bet against it. And just because they're people. And here's the other thing about them. And listen, I don't want to make more of this than it is, because they played really tough games in tough environments, and they're everybody's Super Bowl. But they went to Austin and they were not good. They were fortunate to win that game. And if Quinn Ewers doesn't get hurt, they probably don't win it. They go to Fayetteville, and in fairness to them, Bryce Young got hurt that day, and they were way up when Young got hurt. But as it was 28-23, first part of the fourth quarter. Alabama facing a 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15, deep in their own territory. That stadium was starting to get kind of raucous. It was like, whoa, what is happening here? And then they blew it open in the fourth quarter. They go to Neyland. The Neyland was crazy. Don't get me wrong. There weren't many teams that were going to Tennessee and winning that day.
No.
But they didn't win. And then they go to Baton Rouge and Tiger Stadium, blah, 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 I get it. But they didn't win there. And LSU's a good team. They are. But this is going to be Brian Kelly's worst team there.
Probably.
You know, I mean, they don't have the elite running back. They're not loaded at receiver. They got some dudes, but they're not just loaded at receiver. They're good up front, but they're kind of young. Defensively, Perkins is a monster, and they got some other guys, but they're not just loaded with superstars on defense. And Alabama lost. They couldn't put them away. But why? Penalties, stuff that happened. They slogged along, and then and so now we're to think, hey, with less on the line, less motivation, you're going to come to Oxford and you're going to play great.
Well, and
I haven't played great on the road yet.
Yeah, no, and they're a very different team on the road. There's no question about that. What's ironic about all the things you just said, all of which is true, they're also a missed field goal and a drop 2-point conversion away from being number 1 in the nation. So
now that goes 2 ways, and I've always been like, hey,
right.
It's why, you know, at the beginning of the year, my formula is always wins, losses, and tosses, and then I take the tosses and I divide them in half. And for Alabama, they've played 4 toss-up games and they split them.
Yeah,
now,
so far.
They could easily be undefeated. But if you're going to say that, then you got to go, well, they could easily be a 4-loss team.
So let's get into I'll let you go here. You're very gracious with your time, but I do want to get into Kiffin and just sort of where his headspace is. I have long believed, and I don't think it takes too much scientific study here to indicate that a winning head coach in Oxford, Mississippi for a single man making millions and millions of dollars is a pretty damn good place to live and a pretty good place to exist as a human being, I imagine. But can you win a national championship? No, probably not, although the expanded playoff may change that, or at least challenge that. And you can't win a Super Bowl in Oxford, Mississippi. So when Lane Kiffin lays his head down at night, what is it that he dreams about accomplishing in his career? Because to me, that is far more about where he ends up, how long this thing runs at Ole Miss forever, like Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, or Barry Alvarez or Frank Beamer, or does he dream about the Lombardi Trophy or national championships? Because I don't think you can win those two things in Ole Miss last time I checked.
The one thing you said that's for certain is that you can't win the Lombardi at Ole Miss. That's not going to happen.
I'm positive of that, Neal. I'm positive.
The rest of it's really interesting, and it's kind of complex. And I wrote this the other day about Lane Kiffin. He's not going to sit down and do a tell-all with Oprah Winfrey anytime soon. So we don't know exactly what he thinks, right? But here's some signs that are interesting. And don't get me wrong, I'm not the guy that thinks Lane Kiffin's at Ole Miss for the long haul. I don't. Now, that said, I don't think he's going to Auburn unless Auburn gives him some incredibly insane contract. Why?
What would that, before you go on, like 10 years, 100 million guaranteed?
Yeah.
Okay.
A 9-figure deal, guaranteed.
Okay.
And if you're Auburn and you do that, hey, good luck. Might work, might not. Texas A&M wishes they weren't doing that right now.
Yeah.
You know, and Jimbo's, we can all make fun of Jimbo, but he won a national title. You know, we can all do our thing about Jimbo, but
right.
Nobody was saying that when they did the contract.
No.
I mean, you know, maybe somebody did, but most people didn't. So, you know, when you give Lane Kiffin the $100 million contract, you have to go, okay, well, we just gambled because you did. No matter who you are, when you give somebody that much money guaranteed, it's a gamble. You know, I mean, I want the Cubs to sign Trey Turner or Carlos Correa, and I'm like, it's not my money. Give them whatever.
Right.
6 years down the road, when they're not productive anymore, and I'm like, why are we paying him $40 million? I mean,
as a Mets fan, I'm all for Cohen spending all of the money. I know it's never going to lead to anything, so it's fine.
But 5-6 years down the road, you're questioning one of those contracts,
right.
and they're like, well, see.
Well, and I guess there is an ego angle here too, though, which is the only school in the state of Alabama with Nick Saban. Like that's the only other angle here would be the ego play, right?
So here's where I think you asked me kind of what I think when he lays his head down. Number one, he's changed a lot in 2 years. 2 years ago, I think he'd be like, yeah, get me to Auburn. Well, now he's put some sweat equity into this. He has he admitted this out loud. It was kind of a interesting moment early in the season where he said, you know, I look back on it and I needed Oxford and Ole Miss a lot more than it needed me. And his daughter's here now. Landry's a senior at Oxford High School. She's registered to enroll at Ole Miss in August. What does that mean? I don't know. She could obviously go to a different school. But she's here. When he first got here, he had no real ties here at all. Well, now all of his family's here. His dad's here, his sister's here, all that stuff. There's rumors that his son, Knox, is going to start his freshman year at Oxford High School next year. Right now he's in California. Is Knox coming? I don't know. And I don't ask these questions because I don't think it's appropriate. But these things are out there. He is had there been a 12-team playoff last year, Ole Miss would have been in it. If there were a 12-team playoff this year, Ole Miss would be very much in the conversation at this moment. I mean, they'd be in it as of today.
Yep.
And, you know, if they won out, even if they didn't win the West, even if LSU won the West and got to go play because Ole Miss lost at Tiger Stadium, they'd still be in the playoff. Nobody questioned that. Even at 10-2, they'd be on the periphery of the playoff. So can you win a national championship at Ole Miss? Well, it's certainly hard. But the answer to that is, well, if you can make the playoff, yeah. I mean, yeah. Because if you're in the playoff, you're competing for championships. But, I mean, look, is it easier at Auburn? In the past it was, and it might still be. But what we don't know is what is Auburn in the transfer portal era? How attractive is Auburn in the transfer portal era? I'm not saying it's not. We don't know. So if you ask me what does he really want, my guess is that he would like to stay at Ole Miss long enough to silence some of this he jumps at the first opportunity talk. I think he'd like to be able to silence that he can't build a program so that when one of the big jobs opens, Alabama, Texas, Texas A&M, where he's that guy.
He is the succession plan to Nick Saban. Like, there's nobody else. Like,
Dabo's he's probably not today.
But in 4 years, yeah, exactly.
2-3 years from now, absolutely could position himself to be that guy. And look,
Dabo ain't it. Dabo ain't it.
We do this Joey Freshwater thing with Kiffin, and it's just not. He's not out and about crashing the parties in Oxford.
No.
His friends close to him will tell you he hasn't had a drink in almost 2 years. He looks completely different. He works out twice a day. And we would joke about the Pilates and stuff, but I mean, the guy looks great. I think he's kind of put himself together a little bit. I mean, he'll talk about the hell he went through with his divorce. And, I think he kind of blames himself, at least for that publicly. He talks about getting fired at USC and, he worked for Nick Saban, and then he took the job at FAU, and, he did that GIF on this, what an exciting time, and all that stuff. And he's learned a lot, and he's been humble.
Yeah, he had different jowls in that FAU video. More like my jowls. Less like
he's grown up.
Yeah.
And, maybe it took him a little longer than other people to grow up, but look, he's a super involved dad, and his daughter's got all of her friends over there all the time, and he's you see him in the TikToks and stuff. And it was really funny. Like, there was some TikToks the morning of the LSU game, and people are like, what's he doing with a bunch of girls? And I'm like, dude, it's his daughter and some of her friends. I mean, I do that with my girls,
Right.
So I don't know. I think we've seen a human side of him.
It's also not his fault if every NFL team agent wants to try to hire him. Like, that's not his fault. So.
And there's a part of me that kind of thinks deep down that's the next step. Maybe it's and you hear people whisper that it's the NFL. And maybe it is. I don't know. But he's done a really good job at Ole Miss. But if he left now, unless it was for Alabama or whatever, if he left now, I think people would go, gosh, man, I mean, has he really changed?
Yeah.
But if he stayed at Ole Miss another 2 years and then landed one of those jobs, that's a different deal. I think we'd look at it differently.
All right. Tell everybody where they can listen to you talk all the time, and give me a final score.
Okay. MPW, the easy part, MPW Digital on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. M as in Michael, P as in Paul, W as in William Digital. I'm at rebelgrove.com. If you're an Ole Miss fan looking for daily Ole Miss content, we have tons of it. Same price today as it was when George Washington was inaugurated. We are the only thing that's recession proof, inflation proof. We're not affected, no matter what happens in a global economy, whatever. The same price. And then a score. Am I crazy to think it's one of two outcomes? It's either Alabama by 14 or more, or Ole Miss wins.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's Bama by like 30, or Ole Miss wins outright. I agree with you.
I don't know which of those two things it would be. If you told me Alabama wins 34-17, I'm not surprised. If you told me that Ole Miss wins some crazy 35-34 game with Lane Kiffin calling some nutty play and throwing his thing up in the air, I'd buy that too. What I don't buy for some reason, which means, hey, if you're betting out there, go with this. I don't buy Alabama 27-20. That doesn't sound right.
A close, hard-fought win. Although they are very good on the road at driving down the length of the field and kicking a field goal to tie or win the game in the last minute. Bryce Young has done that now like 15 times. So we shall see. Neal, thank you so much for joining us, man. Always a pleasure talking with you. Check out all of his stuff all over the digital interspace there. We do appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Always good to be with you. Big fan of your work.
That was Neal McCready of Rebel Grove. You can catch him all over the YouTube. You heard where he, told you all you guys out there to go check out all his podcasts, the videos, the recruiting stuff, everything. Listen, Lane psychologically is fascinating, and I think he explained a lot about, now that his family's in Oxford, it looks like the son might be moving to Oxford. Like, is he matured? Has he evolved? Has he changed? Again, the NFL is going to come calling at some point. If I'm Auburn, I'm making that call. And you said this last week on the show. You just think he's kind of, and Neal echoed what you said, which is that he's building something that he wants to be a little bit more a part of. And maybe $100 million will make him rethink that, which maybe. It would, which I would hope for all humans.
And
the
chance to, go head to head with Saban. But yeah, I'm following you.
And upside of a national championship, right? Which I know Neal said, well, if you're 10-2 1 year and then this year you get into a 12-team playoff, I mean, isn't that technically competing for a national title? And I'd be like, I wanted to say, like, no. Like, the 12-team playoff is tricking people into thinking they have a chance at a national championship. I don't know if Ole Miss will ever have a 1-85 roster where it can win 4 games in a playoff where they have to beat.
That's so many more games.
I know, where they have to beat.
That makes me mad when I think about it.
Notre Dame in week 1, Clemson, and then Ohio State, and then Alabama. Like, that's a 4-game stretch that's just really, really, really hard. So
yeah, very much so.
But Lane Kiffin, fascinating dude, and Ole Miss, Alabama, fascinating game. So he said, "I want you." This will be our last thing. We'll let you guys all go. jedunn.com, top 100 healthiest place to work in the United States, and please check out the YouTube page, rate, review, subscribe. share the show with somebody that you know is an SEC football fan. Please do that if you're especially.
Yeah, that would be great. And remember to screenshot. Find this me flicking Braden off and screenshot it.
What you haven't told anybody what the prize is, so we don't know why they're going to do that, but we'll see.
What's a good prize?
I mean, I'll figure something out. It'll come out of the company budget. We'll do something.
Okay.
I've got lots of little mini helmets back. I got lots of memorabilia. We could give you something off out of my set here.
Yeah, there you go.
So Neal said, and I agree with him, it's either going to be Alabama huge or Ole Miss wins close. And I can see those two things being the most likeliest. Do you think something else? Yeah, sorry. The likeliest outcomes.
I don't totally understand why it's one of those two things.
I think the argument is that that Alabama, if they're in a close game, they've lost too many on the road, and the mental sort of toughness and the discipline and the penalties, and like you can't keep living like that. That's why Tennessee and LSU have beaten them. And that if it's close, he likes Ole Miss at home to finish the job and get the win, and not Alabama. But if it's not close, there's no chance it's Ole Miss blowing Alabama out. I mean, Bama's a 12, 11-point favorite. So I agree with him. I think Bama's going to win big. But if it's close, I don't know if
I think Bama will win. I don't necessarily think it's like, unless Bama wins big, it's going to be Ole Miss pulling it out. I could see Bama winning closer than that. I don't think they're going to lose, but it's like rolling the dice. It's like, I didn't think they were going to lose last week. And if I just if I stay on the same number, I'm more likely to hit. Yep. But I really do. I do think they'll pull it off against Ole Miss. Like we just talked about, they're not going to be wasting time and just repeating patterns. They're going to try to pull it off. So
I would not gamble on this game, but I probably would lay the 11 or 11.5 if I had to. So I'm going to take my LSU money line call last week and just walk out of the building, and that's the end of I'm done. I'm cashed out. I know when to hold them and when to fold them. I'm done.
If you're going to take something, I would take the spread on LSU Arkansas. I think it's going to be larger spread than that. Don't you?
You like LSU laying the points? Okay. All right. There you go. I like Tennessee
more than 3.
Tennessee minus 21 against Missouri. That's my bet.
Okay, but here, all you have to think about is LSU just beat Alabama, and then Arkansas just lost to Liberty. Like, I do think it's going to be more than a field goal of difference.
Vegas, with that number, Vegas is begging you to take LSU, which means second thoughts. You should have second thoughts about that.
Yeah, this is true.
But I
don't know. I want a 5-way parlay. I'm good at betting.
That one time in 2020. Generally, you are correct. Also, J.E. Dunn, always correct. A great choice, a great smart choice. You can check out all of our picks against the spread on the YouTube page, Steven Lassen and myself, every single week. Steven is absolutely crushing right now.
Yeah,
15-7 against the spread in his last 4 weeks. He's just dominating. So make sure you check that out. Our second episode every single week turns into a podcast on Fridays, YouTube page as well. Erin, where can people find you?
The Erin Dugan on Twitter and Erin_Dugan on Instagram.
Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Enjoy week 11. My name is Braden Gall. This has been Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network.
Later.